Hello, everyone. Welcome to the National ESP's webinar today. It's the top of the hour, or just past, so I'd like to get started. We'll be admitting more people into the Zoom as we start our session today. So welcome to our July session. I call it our bonus sessions here in the summer for additional content that people are interested in. Today we have a presentation on refining your poster, improving the user experience for your presenter and the audience, excuse me. And as we get started here, if you are someone who is preparing a poster for the National ESP conference, if you could just indicate that in the chat box, we'd appreciate knowing that as well. As you heard at the start of this, we are recording it and will be posted to the ESP YouTube channel. And we'll send an email, one to all of you, as well as everyone who registered for today's session, uh, after it gets posted on the YouTube channel so you can watch it at a later time and also reference it as you're putting together your conference presentation posters. So today our presenter is Jeremy Kane. He is a graphic designer at the University of Wyoming Extension, where he designs a range of educational and research publications, posters, conference materials, and branded communications. Jeremy has over 2 decades of experience with production artwork, publication design, and visual communications in commercial, academic, and scientific sectors. He has contributed design work to research initiatives supported by organizations including the National Science Foundation, United States Department of Energy, and the National Center for Atmospherics Research. His work has received national and regional awards from the Association for Communication Excellence and the Wyoming Press Association. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Okay, I'll just jump right in here. So, like Paul said, my name is Jeremy Kane, and I'm currently the publications and graphic designer at the University of Wyoming Extension. I work on a variety of print and digital projects, but laying out research posters is a guilty pleasure of mine. They're literally a big blank canvas where we get to use all sorts of graphic design and typography elements. Today, I'm going to cover some technical layout choices and what they accomplish. In my department, that is helping readers, keeping readers engaged through visual control. We'll go through some descriptions, and then I'll have some examples to walk through at the end. So let's start with a question. When was your first research poster, and have your decisions about design changed since then? For many people I've spoken with, it was in 7th or 8th grade for the science fair. It also tends to go hand in hand when they were being introduced to the scientific method. So this diagram represents the history of research poster design for a lot of people. Teachers want to make sure students get all of the important parts included, and students take diagrams like this very literally at that age. Boxes and separation of ideas, which we'll talk about later, set headings. In this diagram, for example, there's an imbalance of grid and misalignment of things. It doesn't describe how to use graphics or images or color, and it implies how long a section could be or should be relative to other sections. And so we're going to talk a bit about how we can get out of those boxes. So what is a poster in the modern era? Is it just an advertisement? Marketing your work has become part of the scientific process, as well as finding funding is something I've come to learn. But an advertisement is meant to be a glimpse or a summary of your work, just to give them an idea. An example of what, like an NSF grant proposal I've seen are 15 pages long and 810 line maximum. Yes, you can fit 810 lines of text on a poster, but just because you can do that doesn't mean you should do that or that it works. So we're going to focus on captivating people and controlling what they're looking at. Once someone is looking at your poster, we can keep them looking at it. So catching the eye of the reader doesn't have to scream at the reader. Keeping the eye doesn't involve putting blinders on the reader. And we can use organization of information through different techniques to visually capture and keep their attentions through things like typography, margins and columns, graphical guidance, visual depth. So where to begin, but you already knew that. You probably already have an idea of the parts you want to include in your poster. Posters are a summary of your work, not just a reproduction of your paper or journal article. So key is summary. It's a pitch for people to explore your work through a conversation with you, and then find your full paper elsewhere. So if you remember that 810 line NSF grant proposal, this is what 800 lines of text looks like as a poster. Obviously, that's not going to work for anybody. So you'll gather all of your bits, but you won't lay them out like a paper. For as far as software choices, I've built posters in all of these, but I spend most of my time in the Adobe products. You should use whatever you're most comfortable with. Messing up keyboard shortcuts because you're unfamiliar with an app feels terrible and wastes time. So the more time you've spent with a piece of software, the better. Just a note, if you have a Canva account, and especially a pro account, and you are interested in doing more things, more advanced things, Canva has recently acquired Affinity, which is a fantastic alternative to Adobe products if you're looking to do more advanced things. So a conference will give you a maximum allowable size for a poster. Be as close to that as you can. But if you plan on using a poster multiple times, be ready to pick a size that is traditionally safe. So as big as allowed, and choose horizontal. It can feel good to do something different, like go vertical, because you'll be like, I'll stand out and be different. But because of the height limitations, you're going to lose a significant amount of space in terms of how much you can include. And suddenly your text will be smaller, your images will be smaller. And the rules, if you're going to a conference that has a rubric for judging, stick to the rubric. I like to say it's like play to the rule book and then bend the rules. So make sure you're following specific guidelines and then start tweaking things. So 48 by 36 horizontal is my go-to size. And inside this space, then we'll get into the structures that we're going to use, margins, which is the space from the edge, columns, which is spacing in the middle, grids, which help keep everything aligned, and then ultimately grouping your content together. So first thing you're going to do is your margins. Margins are there to protect the text and keep the reader from straying. If the reader is reading a line of text or looking in an image and they get too close to the edge, their eye can fall off the page. So if they're reading and it takes a fraction of a second for their brain to be like, I've reached the end of this sentence and I need to go back to the beginning of the next one. If their eye wanders and hits the edge of the page, that gives them the subconscious choice that they can leave the page. So I like to set up different levels of margins. So there's the first inch of the page, 0 to 1 inches. Nothing goes in there except for the background color or maybe the edge of some graphical elements. Between 1 and 2 inches, you can have large heading text or, again, more graphical stuff, but we keep all the tight body copy text within the 2 inches. That way, if somebody, when they're reading along and they hit the edge, they have plenty of time to realize they need to stop and go back without leaving the page. As far as, and in that first inch though, with graphical elements and color, be sure you're bleeding your color to the edge because that also helps create a frame. And that's why a lot of paintings and pictures and museums have frames, is to keep you in the landscape. So we're giving ourselves a frame. Next, you're going to bring in your type and your text. And you're going to want to bring in a lot and you're going to bring in too much. So be ready to cut back. Text is obviously an important part of your poster, but in a world of a million fonts, finding appropriate ones can seem easily, but subtle differences in typography can make posters a bit awkward. My favorite thing to do is default to my institution's brand book. If whatever institution you're at will have a marketing team, they've got font choices picked. I like to stick with those. Matching your institution's look is great for the marketing step of the scientific process. Serif versus sans serif fonts. Serif fonts are all the ones that have the little bits on each letter around the edges. Those help small type be more readable. But because everything we're doing on a poster is large, sans serif typefaces tend to be preferred. Some people argue that serif font should be used for the title and sans serif for the rest of the poster. And technically, that is another way of doing a form of hierarchy, but it doesn't look purposeful unless you're going to start using more of those sans serif fonts in parts of the poster, like headings and things like that. I like to repeat things at least 3 times to make them feel like I did this on purpose. For type, the hierarchies, aside from the serifs, size, bold, and color. And then hierarchy is best enhanced by choosing 2 of those things. So make the text big and bold, make it big and colorful, make it bold and colorful. Choosing 2 will help you create a better hierarchy for your headings and body copy. Avoid italics. Scientific names get italics, everything else doesn't. So save italics for scientific names. Italics can also change the letter forms and make them difficult to read. And avoid underlining text. A line can be used to separate a text from the rest of the text, like I did at the top of this slide, for example. But don't, so the text is separated, but it's not underlined. So there's a difference there. Text sizes, because posters are read at a distance, font sizes 24 to 36 point for body text. Paragraphs is preferred. People aren't used to working with fonts that large for this sort of thing, and can feel uncomfortable. In some fonts, the line spacing between lines gets weird when you get up into those sizes. So be ready to make the type big, but then compact the line spacing. It will save you space. It will make it more readable. So 24 to 36 for body copy. Headings can be 50 points or bigger. Titles upwards of 120 points. I did one poster where the title was 150 point, and that's not even an option you can choose in the drop-down menu. You have to go in and pick it. And making those choices purposefully is not something a lot of people are used to doing. Next, we're going to talk about columns. You remember in the beginning diagram, the poster is divided up into a left, a center, and a right, where you can kind of stick to that idea because by doing columns, these for text and images. People consume text in chunks, and columns help make digesting that text easier, as well as making it easier to find the next line. Space between columns keeps the reader where they're supposed to be instead of drifting off into other columns. Left justify versus full justify. People see journals, scientific publications with full justified text, and they think that's what their science poster needs to be done as. If you have advanced tools, like if you're working in Adobe InDesign or you're working in Affinity, there are ways to fix full justified text to look good. But you'll notice in the full justified example here, there is a lot of strange spacing on each line. And so in order to avoid that, there are, like I said, there's options in the advanced software, but for just, if you want to get it done and get it simple and have it be safe, left justified text doesn't have those problems, and it's easier for people to read. It tidies up the space and keeps everything nice. So just like in a book or magazine, newspaper, everywhere you look, grids. We're going to line everything up in grids. It helps the flow, makes things easier to read, know where they're supposed to go. It's subtle. It keeps the space between the grid is like a margin. It helps keep the reader, it frames the text, it frames the image, it keeps everything nice and tidy because tidy poster is easy to read and easier to digest. The fundamentals are the fundamentals because they work, and digesting the information is tried and tested. So that's a lot about text, and you're going to have text, but remember, it can't just be text. Photos, figures, graphical elements, they give the reader somewhere to rest and use a different part of their brain. And that makes the poster paced, more comfortable. These elements can either be related to the text, they can be placed near the part of the text they are related to, or they can just be there for general use. I like to use photos from extension programs of people in action for general use and to give the poster somewhere that people can rest. Graphical elements and margins can be used for the same thing. And gradients, going from an area where you shift from one color to another, can be something that people look at and they say, oh, that's a really cool element, but it needs to be done subtly. That way you can create visual depth without slapping the viewer in the face. And then we're going to get into content grouping. If you remember in that original diagram of the middle school science fair poster, everything's put in a box. It showed everything compartmentalized separately, and we are allowed to compartmentalize things, but we don't have to compartmentalize them all separately, and we don't have to use hard edge boxes to do it. But you can put things in a box, but you can put similar things inside the same box that are related and that helps people digest that those things are related and part of the same idea. And then they can absorb that and they will keep that in their mind while they're thinking about the poster and remembering things. And like I said, it doesn't have to be done with a hard-edged box. It can be done through negative space, the margins, the space between columns. All of that stuff can be done subtly. It doesn't have to be a hard edge. And because if you create a frame, you also told them when they reach the edge of that frame, do I leave now or do I know where I'm supposed to go next? And part of guiding them through the poster is making sure they know where they're supposed to go next. Finally, color. A lot of times I'll start a poster in black and white, make sure all the information fits comfortably, and then I'll start adding color to emphasize more visual organization, guide readers through the poster. If you don't like choosing colors, your institution's brand book will have colors you can use, just like fonts. It's one less thing it's one less thing to think about, which I like a lot. Color can also be selectively pulled from photos or graphics that you have, so that there's a connection between the color of the poster and the color of your graphics. One of the things I really like to do with my brand colors is take the primary colors of the institution and make those my accent colors, and then take the accent colors of the institution and make those my primary colors. So it goes back to that marketing feel of this is from that institution, but it doesn't slap you in the face of these primary colors that you see all the time. There's just this more subtlety. And the background can be a color. If you want to make, say, a green poster, and you make the background green, lower the opacity or the fill of that green or tint to about 10%. Your poster will still feel green, and people will be like, I saw that green poster, but the text that you put on the poster will still be legible and have enough contrast to make it easy to read. And that's an important part of people fall into this of, I want a color, but then I make the text white, which can be okay, but dark text on a light background is almost always preferable. On the physical poster, this is probably my most fun part. If you have the time and you're traveling to a concert and you have the time to get this done, getting your poster printed on fabric is a fantastic idea. I'm not going to necessarily promote my favorite company that does this, but if you find one that you like and they have a fabric called Sport PK, this fabric doesn't fray. It doesn't need to be ironed. You can fold it up in your suitcase and take it out at the conference. No more poster tubes. It even says, we'll even say in the description, this is great for research posters. I had one researcher present their poster that was printed on fabric at a conference, and then they wore it as a scarf that evening when they went out with their colleagues, and they ended up presenting their poster a couple more times at the restaurant and at the bar. And that is an interesting new thing that you can try. So with that, let's get into some examples that I've done recently, and we'll talk about all of it together. So here are two posters. One thing you're going to notice about a lot of my work is that titles, subtitles, introduction, the beginning parts that you want people to read are weighted to the left. This is for readability and interacting with the poster while the presenter is standing there. Presenters tend to stand to the right of the poster. Letting the reader begin on the left without you being in the way makes it more comfortable for a person to be introduced to your ideas. If I'm reading a poster and the title goes all the way from left to right across the top, when I hit that right side, I finish reading the title and there is a person I am almost looking at, and my eyes are going to want to be drawn to that person. And they're going to be watching me read this, and then they're going to want to start talking to me, and I have no idea what the poster is about except for the title. So I like to weight all of that introduction stuff to the left. And then as they move through the poster, they get closer to the presenter, and then you can start having conversations about what's in the work. But in these examples here, you can see we're still 3 columns. We're dividing things up either on the left one here, there's a gradient in the background that's kind of created a visual depth that keeps people drawn in. There's graphics in the midpoint. This researcher did mention that they had a lot of text, and so we put the graphics, instead of just putting them both at the top, we put them in line with the reading to give the reader a place to rest. Headings separate the different areas without needing a hard line box. And then on the right, columns again, margins keep people in place. The colors separate ideas and the sections, but similar ideas and sections are together. And for content grouping. If your program has a logo, it can also double as the heading for your poster, which is something I like to do. So here, the Wyoming Ag and Art Tour and the Cowboy State podcast both have really nice logos that are big and act as a nice introduction to the poster without needing to have it in there twice. But here you can see I have compartmentalized things into boxes, but it's similar things together. And then these create content groupings. The color choices keep people engaged without having them leave, and the margins frame everything together. Framing doesn't have to be, I've created a physical frame made of a color box or something. It can just be negative space, like I said. So it keeps them on the page because their eye doesn't have time to say, I found the edge. Decorative fonts for titles are something you can do, but if you do, make the font choice something that clearly states subconsciously to the viewer, I made this choice to be different than the rest for this effect. Don't just choose something randomly. It should feel related to your work. There are a lot of decorative fonts out there, so be careful. And then on these 2 examples, again, columns still there, but we're guiding the reading order. Graphical elements are in there to help keep people on the page. On the right here, columns that are separated, but they don't have it is a hard edge, but it is created by just the color difference. We haven't put a black line or something around the edge. And that helps, keep things like come together, but it's not telling people this is a hard line that you can't cross. Like you're free to flow through it. A background in this one in particular is lower the opacity. There's a color gradient to it. It provides a depth to the poster and keeps the viewer in the image. On these two, you could see still three columns. But the ideas are compartmentalized. And here I have used a dark edge. So I don't want to say you shouldn't do things because it can work. But again, background gradients keep people in the image because it creates a depth. Logos, general images, these ones do have a top and bottom framing using a colored box. So like I said, you can use negative space, but you can also use something that's physical, like a colored edge like that, and that keeps the person in the poster. Again, on the right, you can see our different size fonts with bold have created headings that I haven't had to separate everything into a different box, but then the boxes on the right are supposed to be about separate programs, and so they are separated, but the font choices are all the same, the weights are the same, and it keeps everything together. This poster on the left here is three columns, but you'll notice some things span more than one. And so at the top, we've got the title all the way across the top. So you are allowed to do that. I don't want to say you can't do anything, but then we've got single column, double column. The text spans two columns, but then the pictures are one column, the graphic is one column, the need, impact, and future directions is one column. And at the bottom, we have another set of graphical things that spans two columns. And it creates a flow through the poster from left to right, column by column, that keeps the viewer engaged. And then on the Ready Set Explorer one, still three columns. We've added a fourth one of just general photos that gives people a place to rest. But the title, again, doesn't span the whole thing. And then finally here, decorative fonts. I have chosen to use the decorative font and then repeat the decorative font as the heading for each section. That creates a uniformity that people will, I don't want to say be used to, but it keeps them familiar with it. Like this is a heading, this is a part, this is a part. Still three columns. On Project Palooza here, three columns, but they're different widths, but lots of big general photos. If you don't have a lot to say, photos go a long way. And then this one also has gradient in the background, framing top and bottom. One thing to remember is some decorative fonts do not scale well. So be sure if you picked one, you're like, I love this for my title, but I want to use it in my headings, and it looks really weird, try something else. So I apologize for speaking quickly, but that about sums it up for me. I hope you all think about some of these things and incorporate them into your own posters to make them more successful. And I also hope that you think about some of these things and say, Jeremy's ideas are ridiculous, and produce your own solution that proves me wrong. But if you do that, please let me know so I can be better at my job too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. We appreciate your presentation, and I really enjoyed the practical advice as well as the visual examples that you had there. I sometimes feel like a poster is a little bit of like artwork where, what I personally might enjoy looking at and reading may be a little bit different than what somebody else likes and enjoys reading as well. We did have one question earlier in the chat about in this digital age, why are we still printing posters and bringing them to conferences? Why can't we just bring flash drives and plug them in once we get there?
It's not. I was going to say I don't know the technical reasons. I have been to, you go to a conference, and a lot of some of the really big ones, you bring your presentation for your session on a USB drive and load it on, and then you pull it up later in whatever room you're in. My guess is they don't. If you've ever been, there's one conference in San Francisco every year, the American Geophysical Union conference. It's 35,000 people. The conference room is thousands of posters every day that get swapped out twice a day. They probably don't want to pay for that many screens. That's probably my only idea.
Yeah, that was my thought too. I know serving on the National ESP Conference Planning Committee, those conference facilities are very creative and inventive in ways they can charge you for things. So not just for the TVs, but the stands and and the outlets that you use and the extension cords. And even when you try to bring your own stuff, they find ways to um, limit and generate revenue off of that as well.
I would
Um,
also say that print materials in general, I am still a fan of print materials. I feel like it is very you get a lot more human experience out of it. You're looking at something that's not a screen for once. But there's also, depending on the room, the smell of the paper. In other publications, like you're touching the paper. Uh, there's just very you're using all of your senses when you interact with a poster, or potentially using all of your senses.
Great. We do have a question hand up from Lori.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in here. A couple of things I think that you might often forget is that if you're doing a poster, and you do have, I think all institutions have a team of communicators like Jeremy's on, that I would say that if you want an opinion or some feedback before you submit your poster, either run it by your communications department and get some feedback, or if you need some assistance, I think most communicators would be willing to at least provide some guidance to make the poster better, or even just asking your colleagues, say, share it with somebody, because oftentimes, just like when you write a story, you often share it with somebody to get feedback. Sharing folks, your design will point out things that you might not notice when you're creating your poster yourself. So sharing it with somebody else before you submit it, before you print it, and making sure you got all the typos fixed and all of that, I think is a good recommendation.
I really like if somebody comes to me and asks me to look at something like this. Like, I'm not going to be able to tell you if something's misspelled, but a lot of it is how you ask, or what, like, you don't just come to you don't nobody would just come to me and say, Jeremy, here's my poster, make it better, or what do you think? Because that's a little open ended. I would, if somebody came to me and said, Jeremy, here's my poster, it has everything I want on it already, and all the images I want to use and all the figures I want to use. How would you tidy this up? Is a great way to be like, this isn't a lot of work I'm asking you for, just sort of a little bit of here and there. What would you tidy up in this? Is a great way to get more responses from people who might be overworked.
Great. Do we have any additional questions? I'm not seeing any more hands up. There will continue discussion in the chat there about poster printing. Yes, for this year's National ESP Conference in Springfield, Illinois, we are working on an option to be able to print your poster in Springfield and have it delivered to the hotel. We're just finalizing the details of that, which is great. Not every conference location as something convenient and cost effective, but it seems like we'll be able to do that for Springfield this year. Um,
Rita had a question about the use of bullets. She didn't see Jeremy talk about bullets. Can you add to that,
Oh, sure.
Jeremy?
Let me go back to a couple examples here. So, like here on the Wyoming Walks poster, they have summarized nicely some of their things into bullet points for me. The improving local governance through governance and leadership training, they also had done some bullets instead of listing things out and like, here's all the things we did, as comma, 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 create bullet points for those things. It's probably the best advice I can give there.
I think one thing from if you notice, like on the Wyoming walks, there's just a few words in the bullet points. What's really distracting is when you use too many words in your bullet points. and you try to put everything in the kitchen sink in your bullet points. So if you're using bullet points, try to be very succinct and limit the number of words that you're putting in those bullet points, because it kind of defeats the purpose.
I have a question about the poster that we're looking at right now, improving local government through governance, and the background that's on it, the blue, and I can't exactly, it's like a government building, I guess, behind that. Um, when do you decide that that's distracting from what you're trying to display versus, adding something
That's
to it?
that's a good question. So in this poster in particular, I had everything laid out, and something about the poster felt flat. I'm like, I'm bouncing around here, but I found myself leaving the page. I wasn't being drawn through the information to really be grabbed and held. Um, so it was already blue. And so I put this image in the background and lowered its opacity, which allowed it to be see-through. And it is down at, it is 5%, 7%, 10% or less. Those, I think people get into oh, I've lowered it by 50%. So I cut it in half. So that's enough, but it's going to be still too much. This is all about subtlety. So 10% or less on opacity. But it really changed how the poster felt in person. And I don't think any of these posters in the slides really do them the justice that they do once they're printed at 4 feet by 3 feet, hanging up in the hallway or in the poster section, and really how they make you feel when you are taken into it.
So I noticed on this one also you're using white print against that blue, and the white is probably the only thing that's going to show up against that blue. So in real life, did that white pop out?
Yes, it worked out just fine. The I tried it originally without the yellow columns. I was like, let's just do it all in white, and that got real messy. And was hard to read. It was hard to follow through with where you're supposed to go and why things were separated the way they were. Having just a section of white text is enough to be like, there are technically probably readability issues with the white text on the blue background. But as far as keeping it brief for just a section was enough that it separated it from everything else to say this is important, but not enough to fatigue the eye while you were reading it.
Great questions today. Okay, one final call out for any additional questions before we conclude. Well, again, thank you, Jeremy, for your presentation today. Very enjoyable and informative. As I mentioned at the top of this session, has been recorded, and we will get it up on the ESP YouTube channel and email it out to everybody who registered for today. My other ESP announcement is, don't forget that the national conference is coming up October in Springfield, and there is the link to registering for that conference, which is registration is currently going on. So with that, I will conclude today's session. Thank you all for attending. We do not have another scheduled webinar currently because we are in our summer off season and we're gearing up for the fall. And we are currently in the process of reviewing the proposals that came in for the fall and spring webinar series. So thanks again, Jeremy, and thank you all for attending. Have a good day.